Hey Seth, I had a question on kind of a crafty type of issue.
Yeah.
Um, I was listening to this master class, and it was Malcolm Gladwell. So he writes obviously
Mm.
nonfiction, but he tells stories though as he's writing the nonfiction,
Yeah.
and he's really interesting. But he was talking about describing people, and the way that in one of his pieces he was describing someone was like, they were unkempt and or like not tidy or something. But like we seem like we always do very visual descriptions, and I'm wondering like if the character is describing someone a certain way, but it's not necessarily like, it's like an opinion,
Hmm.
but it's not necessarily visual. Like,
Yeah.
how are you supposed to reconcile those things?
Yeah. I usually use the word judgment that way. It's like if someone is unkempt or not tidy, uh, then the question um, is the writer aware that this is the character's judgment about the person he's describing? And so with Gladwell, it's like if he's doing nonfiction, it's always his perspective and he's telling the story and he's giving you this. So he's probably like um, smooth enough or got something interesting enough going on that you're going to keep reading it regardless. But on a fiction level, it's like if you describe a character as unkempt, my version of unkempt could be very different than yours. So it might work as sort of a general concept, but it's not going to help me see that character.
Okay, but like, what if that is just how the, like, say you were writing in first person, and
Yeah.
that and you made the conscious choice that the character is describing someone in a judgment type of way versus like a visual way.
Yeah.
Like, what do you what do you do?
Well, the thing that's, I think that's, you can do that. And it's important to realize that a description like that tells you something about the narrator and might tell you something about the character. But it might tell you more about the narrator than it does about the character.
Right.
I was just about to say that because my novel's in first person, and that's what I find is you're seeing the world through her eyes,
Hmm.
and what she sees, and especially in who and what she finds attractive. It's attractive to her. It's not to anyone else. So you're just in her little head in her world.
Right. Or she could be really picky and
Mm-hmm.
find someone with a tie on and the wrong coattails as unkempt, whatever that means. Or, you know, someone could look at someone who, yeah, I mean, there's a whole range of what that could mean. But
Yeah.
I think one part of that is that it tells the reader something about the character, but the other part of that is that, you know, where that's dangerous is that it might not show the reader anything. The reader might not see that as anything. And so you need to add more. Like, why is he unkempt? Is his hair disheveled? Is his shirt not tucked in? Does he have paint on his pants? Like, there's all these different things that could mean. Um, but just the word on its own doesn't create anything visual for me.
So the way to handle this in fiction would be to, if you wanted to have the opinion or the judgment, would be to like explain a couple visual details about why the character would then think that that would be unkempt, you know?
Yeah, show the character. I mean, this is like in the show don't tell class that we're doing. It's like if you say that someone is unkempt, that's telling. And generally that's going to go with a linking verb. So it's
Right.
like, I mean, what would a sentence be that involved unkempt and didn't have a linking verb right before it?
Like, looked unkempt, you mean? Like that would be the linking verb?
Yeah, looked unkempt, was unkempt. All of those are linking verbs. So it's like if you're going to set up your sentence, if you're describing that person with an adjective like that, you're kind of setting your sentence up to have a weak construction.
Okay.
So, you know, if you're just describing with adjectives, he was unkempt, he had gray hair, he had dirt on his pants. You know, the writing isn't going to be that interesting. If you have him brush paint chips off his pants, then you're giving the reader a visual understanding of what his pants look like while he's doing emotion. Or he could be like scratching away dried ketchup off of his shirt. And that gives the reader another sense of what's going on with this person. That's both visual and allows the reader to make a judgment about the character. I think, when we go back to the Conroy essay, the big thing there is like allowing the reader to make the co-creation. And so if you can make the judgments happen in the reader's head by presenting things visually, it makes the writing much stronger.
So maybe one thing, would you do, like, if the narrator's or the character's judgment on what you're seeing, it doesn't line up with what a normal person would see, then that's something to point out as a judgment. Like if I can make the judgment that they're unkempt just by the description, then the person doesn't have to say I think they're unkempt based on what they look like. But if they thought like something that I would think was really unkempt, but then the character or the narrator thinks that they look really tidy, that kind of shows their worldview or something like that. And that's something to point out.
Yeah, like to me, the most interesting way that this would work in first person is like if we see someone who's like, you walk into a bank and the banker's got like the right suit on, but his tie is a little crooked or there's a hair out of place. Like someone calling that guy unkempt becomes more interesting than just like seeing a disheveled guy on the corner and saying that he's unkempt.
It's like too on the nose kind of thing.
Well, it's too easy, and it's just like offering the reader like, look here, this is the judgment about this person. And it's like you've just taken so essentially what linking verbs do are they act like an equal sign. So you're taking like this person and just like connecting them to an adjective. So it's like Harry was unkempt. Well, so now we have unkempt Harry. What did he do? Like what's going on with unkempt Harry? It's like just attaching that person to an adjective doesn't do anything for me as a reader other than just telling. It's just like, okay, so now we have an adjective attached to this guy. It doesn't help me see him.
Okay. And I think in Gladwell's work, because he's writing about an idea, so he wants you to focus more on the content of the idea that he's writing about versus the person, and you are seeing it through his view. So I kind of find it ironic that Malcolm Gladwell would call somebody unkempt, because when I look at Malcolm Gladwell, I find him unkempt. That's my judgment of him.
Right.
His hair is pretty crazy.
It is. So, and I've seen him in other places where he's like, kind of rumpled looking. To me, he just looks generally rumpled. That's a difference between writing nonfiction and fiction. And like in my novel, where I have the main character talks about her boyfriend, that she'll say he's handsome, and then I go into, he's always got his hair is always, combed perfectly, and he doesn't leave the house without a jacket, or certain little details about the other person, even if I've made that judgment, because the judgment is telling me the perception of the narrator.
That's the thing, is like the more I'm talking about this, the more I'm thinking that the judgment tells me more about the viewer than about the person who's being viewed.
Mm-hmm. And then you get things like with my character, she talks a lot about how other people look. She finds her best friend very beautiful, and her boyfriend is handsome, and the guy that she had the affair with had this great handlebar mustache that he waxed, and he was just so dashing. So you see, and you not only through these descriptions, but you get that she's kind of superficial. She talks more about their looks than she does about their character. And when we get to the love interest, she begins to notice not necessarily his looks, but his environment. And then we begin to see how she begins to open herself up as she looks at his environment and him in it. how she opens up to love and how she then begins to realize when we get to the point, oh my God, I'm falling in love with this guy. Holy shit. You know, which is a whole new thing for her. So, hope that was helpful.
Yeah. Other questions?
No, but that was really a valuable discussion. I feel like I just all of a sudden thought about how I need to go back and rework certain descriptions that I thought were okay, but I can now I can think about how I could make them better. So thanks.
One of the things that came out of the Show Don't Tell class that was really interesting for me was about how, like in the first assignment, there were a lot of people who were doing descriptions, but it was kind of a description that doesn't really exist in time or exists in like multiple points in time. And so like really making the actions and the moments in a scene specific and moving forward really gives it momentum for the reader, but also really makes it come to life. Like if you wave at every person you see on the street, I have no idea how many people you just walked past or how far you walked or something like that. But if you got to a guy on the corner and gave him the thumbs up and then crossed the street, it's like a singular action, a moment, and an action that moves.
Yeah, that was something in my writing that I was trying to be aware of, would be like the description of somebody if they've just met them versus like knowing somebody already and then describing them.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a separate thing. Like there's going to be like how you describe someone when you already know them is a lot different than how you would like first impression meet them, you know?
Yeah.
Something I'm trying to be aware of.
Well, it's like the characters that we really know as we're reading a book are the ones that we spend a lot of time with. So the first impression, or like the first time they come up on the page, it's good to give them a couple of visual things, but anything like handsome or attractive or smart, like that's not going to stick. It's just an adjective that gets assigned randomly. We still are going to judge those people on our own based on what they do. We're going to judge them as readers based on what they do as we get to know them. And you get to know people by spending time with them, seeing them do things, just being around them.
Yep.
Yeah. I started reading a book by Chris Offutt this week, who was one of my teachers. And it's about this little guy. He's small and young, and he just got out of the Korean War. I think it's the Korean War. He just got out of the Korean War, and he's like walking across Kentucky, and you just get a sense about him by the way that he sees nature around him. And the way that he walks and what he does, he just sort of like walks across these fields and through the woods and smokes a cigarette now and then. And then he meets these people and sort of defends this woman. So I'm really getting to know him. But the visual description of him is just sort of like the foundation element of what it all really is. It's the actions that really define people for us. And so, you know, I saw a lot of people doing descriptions with a lot of adjectives when it was time to really slow down and describe. But the real goal is to slow down and give everything like a full set of actions. You know, if I say he went into the kitchen and made a peanut butter sandwich, it's very different than having him go into the kitchen and take a knife out of the drawer and take the peanut butter out of the refrigerator and the bread out of the cupboard. And then he slices a piece of bread. You know, this is how we really get to see a character. That's
and slices a piece of bread versus taking a slice of bread.
Right, exactly.
Bread.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, where's he getting his bread? Oh, maybe he's making his own bread.
Yeah.
Or maybe he goes to small oven and they won't slice the bread anymore because it was taking too much time. Yeah. It's a, yeah.
Yeah,
so that's
it's
the thing.
a weird things.
Right. It's the weird things and the questions. Whereas, I'm seeing a lot of writing from people that come in the first class, and it's like, well, I don't care about how he makes a peanut butter sandwich. He just makes a peanut butter sandwich. And, the writers who really take the time to get interested in that character and what's that character's kitchen like, and what kind of bread does that person like, and what kind of jelly is that person like that. If you are interested enough in the character to think about those things and write them down, then it makes the reader interested in those things too. And the reader can tell if you're just writing them down because you think they need to go in there, or if you're actually interested. I mean, it really comes down to whether you're visualizing someone make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or not. And sometimes you have to write them making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because you're doing the writer's work of getting to know that character. And then you might find out at the end of the draft that those 5 pages about making, not 5 pages, but that 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich ultimately don't wind up in the book. They get on the cutting room floor, but it was worth it because you as a writer got to know that character, and that helped you write the rest of the book.
And I think too, once you get to know that character, then the actions that they take later on, that stuff might get cut out in favor of actions they do later on that you made clear because it's clear in your head.
Right. Yeah, because you've gotten to know him through how he makes that sandwich, you know what he's going to do later on in the book, and it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we call connective tissue. And some people skip it entirely, and it's really where the rubber meets the road. And it's where the reader can get really interested in the characters and the story, and the writer gets interested in it. And so much more comes out of that. And that's where sometimes as writers, it takes getting to that point to start to make that connective tissue, to really start to enjoy the writing process and enjoy the story. So it's like, once you get into that and actually care, like, well, what kind of dog does this person have? What is the dog's leash like? What is that walk like? Where do they go together? That kind of stuff really makes the writing more fun as well.
What if like the peanut butter sandwich is just not relevant to the story? Can't you just shortcut it?
Yes. Yeah, you can, but you can't shortcut everything. There's got to be some stuff where you really slow down and explore and see what's going on. There's got to be some stuff that's connective tissue. There's got to be something that's important to the writer and to the character. And then you really need to dig into that stuff. But sometimes you have to try digging into the peanut butter and jelly sandwich making to find out if that's important to the character or not. Yeah, it's like being open to exploring things is really important. If you just like shut everything off because you're worried about boring the reader. I mean, this is what I'm finding a lot, is that people are worried about boring the reader. So it's like peanut butter and jelly sandwich, boring. Taking the dog for a walk, boring. Getting in the car and driving to the pizza shop, boring. It's like all these things, the writer is self-judging and afraid to stop and really start writing them, because they're worried about boring the reader. And so they're making judgments. But the only way to really connect with the reader is to really start putting stuff on the page. And that's how you connect with the reader and with your characters. And that's when things really start to get interesting and fun. So the big flip that I'm working on with people is realizing that fear is not a good editor, and that fear of boring people isn't a good editor, and not listening to that and taking the leap to start really putting that stuff onto the page. And then instead of asking like, is this boring? Is this too much? You start asking, is this enough? Is there enough description of making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich here? Or is it still so packed in that the reader can't really understand it or picture it? When is it enough to make the scene visual instead of asking, when is this too much and boring? So that's the big challenge. Hopefully that's the new way to look at it, that some of you guys can take away from the discussion. And that's where we're going to leave it for this time. Thanks to you guys for showing up. Appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you guys more in email and workshop discussions. Thanks, Julie, for dropping me an email to let me know how your draft is going. That was really helpful to hear from you.
Yeah, no, I've been meaning to write you for a couple weeks and I just haven't done it. So
it was good. Liz, enjoy your trip to Japan. And Tish, we'll talk soon.
Yep, definitely.
Next week.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Yep. Thanks.